So we're reading from Sri Guru and His Grace. Um, and Srila Srinivas, he begins talking about revealed knowledge. So the student asks, how will we recognize the Guru if he appears before us in a different body? And Srila Srinivas says, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya argued that Sri Chaitanya Dev could not have been an incarnation. Gopinath Acharya told him, you do not know the Shastra. No, no, Sarvabhauma said. In the scriptures, it is mentioned that the Lord does not appear in Kali Yuga, but only in 3 ages, and is therefore known as Tri-yuga. So this is interesting in that great devotees like Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, whose pastimes are mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Gopinath Acharya might have a difference of opinion about the Shastras. Gopinath Acharya replied, you think that you know so much about Shastra, but in the Srimad Bhagavatam and Mahabharata, there is direct mention of the avatar of Kali Yuga. Have you no knowledge, no recognition of that? Then Sarvabhauma, apparently defeated, said, you go and take prasadam, and afterwards come and teach me. So then again, reading Chaitanya Charitamrita, you can draw all these conclusions about uh, how devotees and great devotees of Krishna and Sri Chaitanya interact with one another. So here you have the Bhattacharya, who has the title of Acharya in his very name, uh, presenting one point of view, and then when he hears a different point of view, he considers it deeply and admits that perhaps his knowledge is not entirely complete. Then Gopinath said, not by the dint of one's study or intelligence can one understand God, but only through his grace. And this is a very important point. The name of our book is Sri Guru and His Grace. So in order to understand God, what is the requisite? Well, the requisite is grace, prasadam. Atapite deva parambuja dvaya prasada leshanu hita evahi. Then Sarvabhauma said, you say that you have that grace and I do not. What is your reasoning behind this? You say that you have the grace of the Lord because you say he is an incarnation. And because I can't give recognition to that, I have no grace. What is the proof of this? So this is also interesting in that Sarvabhauma is looking for proof. And we live in a society where proof is considered uh, to be a very important element of truth. Without proof, we don't believe that anything is true. We want it proven. What is the proof of this? Then Gopinath Acharya replied, Acharya Koke, Vastu Vishaye Haya Vastu Gyan, Vastu Tattva Gyan, Hoy Kripate Brahman. It is evident that I have the grace of the Lord because I know him, and that you have not because you deny him. So, of course, this is a little problematic in the sense that it's kind of a circular argument. He's and the Bhattacharya has already pointed that out. But Gopinath Acharya sticks to his guns. It is evident that I have the grace of the Lord because I know him, and that you have not because you deny him. The answer to your question is given here. Remember, the question was, how do we recognize the guru if he appears before us in a different form? But it gets to the idea, how do you recognize the truth? The answer to your question is given here, our own inner experience, our internal satisfaction. And again, this is a problematic idea, especially for atheists and agnostics. Our own inner experience, our inner satisfaction, our connection or acquaintance with reality is the real evidence. Nothing external can give any real proof. So if you want to grasp, at straws of rational proof, you can check out a thing called um, Gödel's incompleteness theorem, which is a mathematical theorem. It says that some things, while true, cannot be proven. There are there are mathematical truths that are true, but resist any kind of proof. And I'm not 100% sure that I'm absolutely representing that according to the mathematician's position, but uh, it seems pretty clear. There are mathematical principles that withstand proof and are very difficult to prove, and yet uh, those principles are very useful and powerful. Uh, if you want to try to prove the idea that 2 plus 2 equals 4, it can take you a lot of time. That can be proven, probably, right? You want to prove um, pi, for example. Uh, you can try, or you can take a theory about prime numbers and say, for example, every even number is the sum of two prime numbers. But it's a very difficult theorem to prove because you would have to have a set of all prime numbers to prove that that's true. And finding all the prime numbers is a difficult task, even for artificial intelligence. So if you don't believe what I just said, go ahead and investigate the mathematician Kurt Gödel. And it's something like trying to find Srila Sridhar Maharaj's ideas about die to live in Hegel. You can go through the whole Hegel library, and it's suggested and implied, but trying to identify Srila Sridhar Maharaj's subtle version of Hegel is not so easy because it's actually a bit neo-Hegelian. Uh, but anyways, this is an interesting point raised by Kurt Gödel. Our own inner experience, our internal satisfaction, our connection or acquaintance with reality is the real evidence. Nothing external can give us any real proof. And of course, he's saying, well, there is no proof. You can't prove God because consider your position. It's something like there was an interesting book called Flatland, where someone from three dimensions comes into a two-dimensional world and tries to prove three dimensions. But if you're in the two-dimensional world, you can't prove three dimensions because you're living on a plane. You can't explain a cube. So as we are living in a finite world, We can use ration and reason to develop a lot of different solutions uh, to our limited world. And we can use those solutions to create technological marvels like the internet. Um, we use, for example, quantum mechanics to be able to bounce the signal from Mexico over to Ireland or uh, Norway or other parts of the world. Uh, in order to do this, you need to use some very subtle mathematics like quantum mechanics. But unfortunately, you can't explain or understand quantum mechanics. You can use the formulas, but how do they fit into the greater universe of Einstein's general theory is impossible. And very brilliant physicists working at Trinity College, or Oxford, are at pains to develop some sort of synthesis between how we understand subatomic uh, phenomenon and how we understand things like gravity in the real world. So there are some things, even in such material phenomena as mathematics or uh, the dichotomy between Einstein's general theory and quantum mechanics, that cannot be proven exactly, but we know how to use them. They're useful. Uh, they resist an exact proof. And if this is true of the finite world, how much more so will it be true of the infinite? So Sri Ramar said, the only proof for God is self-evident. The only proof of the soul is self-evident, that I'm sitting here speaking and I can see you with my eyes. These are miraculous proofs of the existence of the soul. Our Guru Maharaj gave the example that if one is born in the darkness of a dungeon and someone proposes, let us go see the sun, then the prisoner will carry a lantern in his hand, saying, oh, you will show me the sun? Yes, come with me. Leave your lantern behind. No light is necessary to see the sun. So the position of the scientists and rational philosophers, linguistic philosophers like Wittgenstein, they're arguing over what sort of flashlight batteries we should put into the flashlight to see the sun. And you're saying, no, Energizer batteries are better. No, no, alkaline batteries. So I can prove it here. But no flashlight is necessary to see the sun. His friend will catch him and forcibly take the prisoner into the sunlight. Do you see the sun? And the prisoner will say, oh, this is the sun. By sunlight alone, we can see the sun. Of course, Srila Sri Ramarsa is being optimistic here. Um, you can take the prisoner into the sun, and he will open his eyes. And having lived all his life in darkness, when he opens his eyes, it's a blinding experience. And then he'll say, oh, you have blinded me. Oh, I can't see anything. I was better in darkness. Take me back to the darkness. So, there's a certain resistance towards having our eyes opened. Yomagana Timarandasya Gyananjana Shalaka. That Guru Dev gives us the ointment of divine knowledge, opens our eyes. But sometimes the light is too bright and we prefer darkness. The prisoner will say, oh, this is the sun. By sunlight alone, we can see the sun. And one will have that sort of experience when he comes in connection with the truth. neither calculation nor evidence nor witness, but only direct experience is proof that Krishna is there, like the sun. And you can understand, of course, we take it that Srila Sridhar Maharaj has descended from the spiritual world to enlighten us. But given his pastimes in this world, it would appear to the ordinary mortal that he studied philosophy, he studied law, and he was interested in trying to ferret out the truth. And so he did look at different philosophers and their systems. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's divine association was enough that Srila Sridhar Maharaj felt uh, the Krishna sun is self-effulgent. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Sridhar Maharaj continues, it is said, Atma Parigyanamayo. What to speak of Krishna? Even the conscious unit is self-effulgent. And this is a very interesting and powerful point. Uh, if we take it that the Atma is a particle of divinity, Paramatma, just as a particle of sunlight is evidence of sun. So we can also take it that consciousness or Atma, the existence of, is proof of divinity. So if someone wants proof that there is divine light, one needs only experience one's own divine light in the form of Atma. And since everyone has this experience, there's no need to go searching for a flashlight. We like the flashlight of reason because we can shine it on different things in this material world, and it helps us to exploit the world. But our own innate discovery of soul should be sufficient to develop the concept that infinite soul or God exists. So Srila Sridhar Maharshi is probing this particular verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, 22nd chapter, 34th verse, where it begins, Atma Parigyanamayo. And in that verse, it says, a certain section says there's no God. Sure, another section says there is God. Surely he exists. Others say, no, there is no God. He never existed. This quarrel is useless. Still, it will continue. And this is the Bhagavatam. Srila Sridhar Maharaj is quoting here. The quarrel is useless. Still, it will continue. In a particular section, this argument will have no end. Those who have no eyes will be unable to see the sun. They will say there is no sun. Mata paranishtat angshalokam. This misconception will continue for those who deny the existence of both the soul and the Supreme Soul. For those who have direct experience, there is no question. It exists. Uh, so if someone is daltonic or colorblind, they can't see color. And you can explain color exists. I had a friend who was blind from birth. And at one point he came to me and he asked me, so uh, what is, tell me about the sky. Well, the sky is blue. What is blue? Um, well, blue. It's kind of a cool color. Cool like cold? No, not. Well, it depends. At nighttime, it gets so dark blue that, yeah, it's kind of cold. Okay, so cold is blue. They're not really the same thing. So how do you explain color to a blind man? Uh, Srila Sridhar Maharaj uses the example of the owl. The owl, what is the most outstanding feature of the owl? He has these big eyes. So the owl can see very well at night, but in the daytime, the light blinds the owl. He can't really see. I, I saw once, I was at the university, and there was an owl in a tree, and he took flight and smashed into a building. Uh, he saw the reflection of the sun in a window, and he smashed into the window and fell down because owls can't see in the daytime. So Srila Sridhar Maharaj says, for the owl section, who cannot admit the existence of the sun does not exist. So there are those for whom um, a denial of the soul is very useful. And even while they're living, breathing Atma, they find it more useful to say the soul does not exist because they can't find a rational proof for the existence of the soul, because the existence of the soul presupposes the existence of God, and they don't want to know about God. They don't like the idea. They think God implies the Bible. The Bible implies Leviticus. Leviticus says you can't do this and you can't do that, and so many things. So it's more comfortable to deny the existence of God, but by denying their own soul, uh, they fall into a kind of blindness. If the soul doesn't exist, then who are we? And what will you replace it with? We're mere robots inspired by uh, chemical composition, something like that. Our own realization of a thing will be the greatest proof of its existence. Vastu tattva jnana hoya kripate. This is the argument of Gopinath Acharya in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Your own realization of a thing will be the greatest proof of its existence. And if you're Wittgenstein or somebody, you might find that to be a weak proof. But Wittgenstein himself agonized over his own Christian faith and lack thereof. One may be born blind, but if somehow or other his eyes are opened, he will be astonished to see the particular aspects of the environment. But if one has no vision, he can see no color or figure. Those who have vision will feel, how can I deny the fact? I've seen it. I'm feeling it. It is so magnanimous, so great, and so benevolent. I can't deny all these things. You are unfortunate. You cannot see. Some see, some cannot. In the same place, one can see, another cannot. Those to whom Krishna wishes to reveal himself can see him. Others cannot. It's again another theme that Srila Sridhar Maharaj develops again and again in his teachings is this idea of gradation. And he's always saying gradation everywhere. That's why there's an evolution of consciousness, gradation everywhere. It means some are able to see their own soul, but they can't see the souls of others. Others are gifted with spiritual vision to the point where they can see uh, divinity within every human being, but they don't see uh, Atma anywhere else. They can't understand that uh, animal species are also gifted with divinity. So, for example, you have René Descartes, famous French mathematician and philosopher, who opined that animals are mere machines. They don't feel pain, which, of course, we know now that's not true. Uh, Others are gifted with enough vision to see everything as spiritual. So the Bhagavatam tells us, Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavaneti Shabdyate. There is Brahman realization, everything is spiritual. Above that, Paramatma realization. Uh, this universe is illuminated by the soul, but what is the real light of the soul? It's God, divinity. And what is the personal nature of divinity? Bhagavan. That's a higher level of vision. And so Krishna Tattva, this is the real grace given by the Guru, how to perceive Krishna. Those to whom Krishna wishes to reveal himself can see him, others cannot. In the assembly of the Kurus, when Krishna went to Duryodhana's party with a proposal for peace between the Pandavas and the Kauravas, Duryodhana thought, now we have our golden chance. If we can put Krishna in the prison house now, then the Pandavas will be broken-hearted, and there will be no question of fighting with them. So even those who have some direct connection with Krishna may not understand him. And here we have Duryodhana can see here's Krishna, but he doesn't really get it. The Kauravas also joined in the scheme, and they told Dushasana, go and bind Krishna with this rope. Dushasana came. Dushasana is really the bad guy of the Mahabharata, all the really terrible things that are cooked up by Duryodhana or carried out by Dushasana. Go and bind Krishna with this rope. Dushasana came with the rope in his hand and tried to bind Krishna. Satyaki, Krishna's attendant, was there, and he furiously came at Dushasana with a sword. Krishna peaceably caught hold of his hand and began to manifest himself in such a way that it perplexed Dushasana. When Dushasana saw the universal form displayed by Krishna, he thought, so many figures appear before me. On whom shall I put the rope? So here's Dushasana. He has a direct experience of the absolute divinity of Krishna displayed as the universal form and thousands of powerful, many-armed figures. And his only thought is, well, how do I put a rope around that? He wants to act as a rodeo clown or a cowboy. So many figures were displayed by Krishna in his universal form. On one side there was Baladev, on the other side stood Arjuna, and many revered rishis chanting Krishna's name. Dushasana was perplexed. And Bhishma and Drona began to sing in praise of Krishna. Everyone thought, what is this? This is a magnificent vision with so many faces. The whole atmosphere was filled with the divine spirit. Then Devarshi Narada and so many rishis began to praise Krishna. And in this way, Krishna manifested his universal form before the assembly. Dhritarashtra was blind, but he could hear them all praising Krishna and thought to himself, some sort of wonderful things are happening around me, but I can't see. And so he prayed to Krishna, O Lord, for the moment, please remove my blindness. I would like to see that great manifestation. And so he prayed to Krishna. Afterwards, you can make me blind again, but at least for the time being, remove my blindness. Krishna told him, there is no necessity of removing your blindness. I say that you can see, and you can see. So, as the Bible says, the Lord said, let there be light, and there was light. By the Lord's will alone, even physical blindness was no bar to seeing that great manifestation of Krishna. So the physical eye can't see God. Only the divine eye can see him. And so this is interesting. We cannot see divinity with our vegetable eye, uh, but he can be seen through sound, through the Hare Krishna mantra. And George Harrison is such a sweet man. He loved Krishna in his own way, helped publish Krishna book where he says, all you need is love, Krishna. But he wrote that song, My Sweet Lord, where the refrain is, I really want to see you, Lord, but it takes so long. Uh, so a lot of devotees, you know, anyone with spiritual curiosity falls into the category of looking for divinity. We want to see it. Come on. I really want to see you, Lord. Come on. And so we try with so many different images, photos, paintings, deities, even. But each deity maker will have his own particular way of representing Krishna. Sometimes the deity of Krishna is white, sometimes he's black. Sometimes he's sort of Shama Sundar, like a dark cloud, somewhere between black and blue and gray. But while we try to get the physical experience of divinity with the vegetable eye, it's not that you can see Krishna with the eye. You can really see better with the mantra. So the physical eye can't see God. Only the divine eye can see him. There was a famous uh, book in the 1960s that I read when I was a little boy called The Third Eye by T. Lobsang Rampa. And in that book, a man is admitted into a Tibetan monastery, although he's from the West. And after passing through different stages of mystical revelation, he's deemed fit for the proper opening of his third eye. And the monks uh, tie him down onto an ancient wooden slab and with an obsidian knife very carefully uh, cut open uh, his forehead and reveal within his pineal gland the third eye by which he can see uh, what he needs to see of the divine light. Uh, but of course, the book was a fantasy. The author was Irish and he never left Ireland. He wrote a good number of books, The Third Eye Returns, The Third Eye Closes, The Reopening of the Third Eye, Son of the Third Eye. And to this day, he's revered as some kind of a lama, but he never visited Tibet and he never really read any books about Tibet. He invented the whole thing because the third eye, as such, it's not a physical member that you can surgically open, but we're told that with the help of Guru Dev, his association, his service, Upadekshantite Jnanam, Jnaninas Tattvadarshina, uh, Tadvidi Pranipatena, Pariprashnena Sevaya, by Pranipat, Pariprashna, and Sevaya, sincere inquiry, service, you know, uh, by assuming a certain kind of closeness with the guru by sitting at his feet. Upanishad, it means to sit at someone's feet. And how that divine knowledge is transmitted, it's a subtle thing. But what Srila Guru Maharaj is pointing out is, to some extent, this is self-evident. The Guru helps you to open your third eye to the self-evident truth about the nature of the soul. and if one is lucky enough, the nature of Krishna and the search for Sri Krishna. There is no necessity of removing your blindness. I say that you can see and you can see. By the Lord's will alone, even physical blindness was no bar. And by the will of Krishna, the divine eye was temporarily given to Dhritarashtra. I like that. The divine eye. So what is the nature of this yoga vision? The divine eye. So there's different kinds of yoga. There's yoga so that you can have, you know, uh, a tighter body, you know. Uh, the ladies, they like to practice yoga so that they'll be more slim and have a tight body. But this is not the yoga that is spoken of in Bhagavad Gita. The yoga of Bhagavad Gita is how to develop this sort of yoga vision or divine eye. Ultrasonic sound. So what I was saying about how we see with the mantra uh, comes up next. Ultrasonic sound, the ability to recognize divinity descends from above. We cannot see God with our mundane senses, or to speak of being able to see the infinite. Our senses are so limited that our ears can only hear sound of a particular wavelength. We're told that the sun, the moon, and all the stars and planets are all revolving and creating a huge sound, but our ears cannot hear that high degree of ultrasonic sound. There was a composer, Holst, I think it was, who created a thing called the Planets Suite. Adwai would know. I think it's Gustav Holst. He had this idea that each one of the planets creates a particular vibration or sound as it moves through the heavens. But we can't hear that, nor can we hear subsonic sound with our ears. Our eyes are designed to catch only a particular wavelength of light. So here's pointing out why on earth would you expect to see God when you can't see infrared or ultraviolet? Why would you expect to be able to hear divine sound when you can't hear the sound of the planets? We cannot see either ultraviolet or infrared light. Our material senses are limited to a particular plane of perception. I wanted to shift gears a little bit and find out more about this Bhagavatam verse that he quotes. So I'm going to read a little bit from The Loving Search for the Lost Servant, where he quotes that same verse in a slightly different context. He says, so it is not from any qualification on our side that the Absolute can be caught. Whomever he chooses to make himself known to will know him. This is explained in the Upanishads. I'm reading for Loving Search. He cannot be known by lectures or discussions. Sorry, folks. By sharp memory or vast intelligence, or by genius or supernatural intellect. One may have extensively studied all the revealed scriptures, but that is no qualification. Krishna reserves all independence on his side. There's only one way by which he can be known. Whomever he chooses to make himself known to can know him. Otherwise, all rights are reserved there by his sweet will. So then he quotes this I'll skip ahead where he quotes this Bhagavatam verse. He says, I once met a scholarly sannyasi in Badarik Ashram who posed as an atheist in the course of our discussion. He argued, what is the evidence that God or the soul exists? Then I quoted a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. So we get back to this Bhagavatam verse. Atma pragyana mayo vivado, hyastiti nastiti bidardanishta, vyarto pinaivo parameta pumsam, mata paravrita diyam svalokat. I explained to him that although Atma, spirit, is self-effulgent, there's a constant quarrel between two opposing parties. One party says God exists. The other says God does not exist. So, you could take nowadays we hear a lot of political commentators, and someone will say, it's raining. And someone will say, no, it isn't. It isn't raining at all. So the moderator always tries to split the difference and say, well, he says it's raining and he says it's not raining. Um, the truth must lie somewhere between. There's both sides. He says rain, he says no rain. So let's agree on mist, or let's agree on fog. But the other point of view is to go outside and see if it's raining. you know? Because if you walk outside, it will be self-evident. Either it's raining or it's not raining. But the Bhagavatam tells us this argument goes on forever, and there's no resolution. If you try to establish or, you know, argue against the existence of God, that argument will go on forever. This is the nature of logic. Atma parigana mayo vivado. Why? Because it's aparigyana. It's imperfect knowledge of the Atma. So with imperfect knowledge of whether it's raining or whether it's not raining, mayo vivado, they're going to go on with the vad. Hyastiti nastiti. Astiti, it's there. Nastiti, it's not there. Bidharta nishta. And they'll try to establish nishta. They'll try to make that established. Matab paravrita dhyam svalokam. Vyartopi naivo parameta pumsan. And this argument will go on forever, but it's useless. I explained to him that although Atma, spirit, is self-effulgent, there's a constant quarrel between two opposing parties. One party says God exists, the other says God does not exist. Bhagavatam says the Atma is self-effulgent, but still, we find that one class of men say he exists, we see him, he can be seen, and another says he has never existed. This quarrel has no end because one of the parties hasn't got the eye to see what is self-evident. This quarrel is a useless waste of time, but still it will never stop. Why is it a waste of time? Well, it's a waste of time because if you can see that God exists and divinity is an important aspect of life, then you have no need to continue arguing and arguing about it. You have to take up the proper attitude. You have to act. If God exists, then we need to act accordingly. You have to serve God. How? This quarrel is useless. It will continue forever. Why? Because there's those who have the eyes to see God and those who have no eyes to see him or their own self. And this is particularly curious when someone like, I don't know, Sam Harris, or who's the guy who wrote that book, The Selfish Gene, Richard Dawkins, they'll get up on a stage and argue that they don't really exist. The soul doesn't really exist. The world doesn't really exist on one hand. And on the other hand, they'll argue that science is king. So what a waste of time. But they make good money from that. So for them, I suppose it's not a waste of time. Their bugbear is, of course, Christianity. So if a Christian gets up and argues that we live in a Ptolemaic universe where the world is flat, the sun goes around the earth, and the world was created 5,000 years ago, and it was developed as a result of the progeny of Adam and Eve. Uh, all of this can be so easily refuted that the atheists will make a laughing stock of the Christians in short order. And they love that. They can make really good money off that. The curious thing to me is the missionaries went to India 500 years ago, and since that time have used all their arguments to show that Hinduism is complete superstition. But they were unable to proceed. The people in India are still Hindus today. Why? Because the best Presbyterians, and the best the Jesuits armed with incredible logic and philosophy and science, they they would say, okay, well, look, uh, what about Mina Sharira, the Matsya incarnation, the Matsya avatar. Okay, so you have this thing where there was a big flood and the Matsya avatar saved the world, saved the Vedas from the flood. Look, we have the same thing in the Bible, but it's better because we have Noah. And the great Hindu minds of the time would say, yes, you were having your mythology. Perhaps there is some hyperbole, uh, Hindu mythology. You can take it like that. Perhaps the avatar represents uh, light versus darkness. You can take it like that. We don't mind. And then the Jesuits would say, okay, well, but what about Nrsimhadev, the half man, half lion? And the Hindu scholars would say, well, okay, in Greek mythology, you have the centaurs, half man, half horse. You don't have any problem with that. You love the Greek classics and you teach them in your schools. So what's the big uh, problem here? There may be hybrid species. You yourselves with your clones and your uh, trying to create a new animal by breeding the horse with the donkey and creating the ass. You have hybrid species. What's so difficult about that? And the scholars would say, oh. And then the Hindu scholars would say, well, wait a minute now. Tell us about the Atma. And the biblical people would go, well, we don't really know too much about that. Well, is it described in the Bible? Not so much. It says you can lose your soul if you don't believe in Jesus. Oh, well, how does that work? If the soul is immortal and eternal, how does it become lost? Also, if if God is kind, as you say in your New Testament, how is it possible that uh, an individual soul only gets one life, and then on the basis of how he handles temptation, is thrown into eternal hell for all the rest of his existence with no pardon? Even Jesus Christ can't save him. Can you explain that? Well, no. Huh. If the soul is eternal, why would it not go through more than one lifetime? Can you explain that? No. Well, now the Jews will say that so many souls need to come together to form one soul. How do you explain that? No, we can't. All right, well, I advise you to study the Vedanta. And so what happened to these missionaries who went to India is they studied the Vedanta and were astonished. Wow, what an explanation. They studied, some of them, the Bhagavad Gita. And while they weren't converted, what they did was they took back some of the ideas they found in Ramanujacharya and tried to reinsert that into Christianity. There's theologians like Rudolf Otto who did that. And so their arguments would be a little sturdier when they came up against atheists. But professional atheists like Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins and so on, they make mincemeat out of fundamentalist Christians. And so personally, I don't really see any advantage in making common cause with the Christians because their arguments are weak and their perception of spiritual nature is also kind of weak. Anyways, but I'm getting off topic here. So what Sri Ramanuja is saying is, you know, Atma is self-effulgent. Krishna, not so much, but the idea of God, yeah, that's self-effulgent. Yeah, I'm sort of finished with my reading here. I'd like somebody to go ahead, butt in, refute me. Yeah, Pranashish.
Okay, back to the light, right? We're all encouraged to go to the light, to run to the light. The guru is often described as the sun. Okay. Now we know what happened to poor Icarus, you know. So we've also seen that in our own experience of people who get too close to the guru and they all seem to get frazzled and fried and vaporized into nothingness.
Wow.
Right? The ones who get really close to the guru. So, we're so in the one sense we're warned not to get too close to the sun.
Why is that, do you think?
Well, on the simplistic level, it's familiarity breeds contempt, but I'm not sure if that really cuts it in a spiritual way.
I was just going to say that, but I thought, let Pranashish develop the idea. Yeah, familiarity breeds contempt. What do you mean by it? How does that work?
I don't know how it works in a spiritual way. You start seeing the guru as a normal person or something. I don't know. So
Well,
in the beginning, we went new, and like me and Advai also were in India at the same time, experiencing the same thing of not wanting to be around Srila Govinda Maharaj too much of any given time. We sat in the back of the room. We didn't sit and watch him eat like some did, and watch him pick his nose and watch him do all this all day from 2 feet. So we kept our distance physically. Um, I'm not sure whether that was some kind of false humility on our part because we didn't really understand who the guru is or what the light is. But there was a warning not to get, there was like a, it's something within ourselves who said, don't get too close to the guru physically. But
that
you
is a
have
very good point.
experience. You have shown this not to be the case.
Well, this is a very good point. Most of my service was done in separation. I would go to India, listen carefully to what was being said, try to do my best to uh, organize that, you know, in my mind from sitting there physically and listening. And then we'd go back to San Miguel excuse me, San Jose, California, with the tapes. And I would listen again and again to the tapes and go, okay, I think, look, he's quoting, uh, Atma Parigyana Mayo over here, and he says it again over there. But this talk's only 3 minutes, and here he's doing 10. Let's try to bring those together and, listen again and again and try to enter into the teaching. But
But you were never afraid of getting burned like Icarus. You never had that idea.
It's a really good metaphor, Icarus. Uh, Icarus flew too close to the sun. Uh, my point being that most of my service is in separation. Like I lament, I see so many devotees who have such great photos with Srila Sri Ramanujan. I've only got like two. There's, there's one where I'm in a photo with Bhakti Sudhir Goswami and Paramadwaiti Maharaj. But everyone cuts Paramadwaiti Maharaj out because he's no longer in the inner circle or whatever, and zoom in on Goswami Maharaj because he was such a great representative of Srila Sri Rama. And you see the two of them as if in intimate conversation. And I have no count with that. But if you pull back a little in the photo, there's me in the corner, you know. That's, that's me in the corner, you know, using my religion. Because, right? In Bhagavad Gita, it says, you know, Sarva Dharman Parityaja, give up all your religions, you know, give up those formalized ideas you have of Dharma and come to me, come to the light. But I'm mostly not in any photos because I resisted that. And you're right, if you watch the Guru, you know, in his daily transactions, you will find things that will bewilder you. And I could mention a couple of things that I have seen, and it would bewilder you. You would not like it. You will say, that never happened. I don't believe it. And so good on you. I won't. The, the problem is if I never say any of those things, my memory gets edgy and blurred, and then they kind of fade out. But, you know, I have no need of that's why people say, "Oh, can you talk about the pastimes of so and so?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, you know, I remember I would go into the bathroom after they had been in there and then left the bathroom, and I found the bathroom in such and such condition, you know, but is that a pastime? You know, it's not really worth mentioning. I fixed one time, Srila Sri Rama, he used to like to listen to the radio, right? And he had a radio that looked just like this, except except it was really big. It was much bigger, you know, like that, and it had a little tiny speaker because it used tubes. So it didn't work properly. We took the back off the radio and we found there was a moth inside. So we debugged his radio, you know. But is that a pastime? You know, if you get really close to the guru, then you can see, well, how does he spend his money? You know, here's people coming and giving money to the guru. And how does he spend the money? What does he tell other people to do? And the more you get involved in, you know, the quotidian trivia, the minutia of the guru's activities, the easier it is to see him as just an ordinary person, you know. Why is he wearing these kind of shoes? I visited the Bagh Basar Mat in Calcutta once with Padmanabha Maharaj after we'd both taken sannyas. It was a strange experience. We walked into the mat, and all these Matajis got down on the floor and started washing their feet with their hair, which was an incredible, I don't know, I'd have to say it was an erotic experience if I was being honest, but I felt creepy about it. You know, like, whoa, why are these women doing this? And our purpose was to visit Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's room. So we went upstairs to see his room. And in a glass case there, they have his slippers because you're supposed to worship the lotus feet of the guru, right? And his slippers were leather. He wore leather slippers, which just struck me because when I was a brahmachari in 1976 in the Los Angeles temple, one of the first things we had done was we were issued these deck shoes that were canvas tops and, rubber soles, because we weren't to associate in any way, shape, or form with cow slaughter. So there's Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the founder of our mission, and he's wearing leather moccasins. And you have to ask yourself, well, how is that possible? It's possible because those were the only moccasins that were available back in 1920s Calcutta that were of any use. And so that doesn't phase my faith in Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, but I'm saying the closer that you come to the Guru, there's a story about the early conquistadores of Mexico, because the Aztecs believed they were gods. They thought, who are these people? Where did they come from? They didn't come from here. They came from some faraway place, maybe the inframundo. Maybe they descended from heaven or something. They just walked up out of the ocean. It doesn't make any sense. And of course, they had bronze, or golden breastplates and these big helmets. And they rode on horses, getting back to the idea of the centaur, the centaur, the half man, half horse. The Aztec Indians, they saw the conquistadors riding horses. They'd never seen this before. There were no horses in Mexico. So what kind of beast or animal is this? Or is it a god? It's half man, it's half horse. They were very unsure, and they had this mythology that said that a red-bearded golden man from across the seas would return, and that he would be Quetzalcoatl, the half serpent, half eagle god that would save Mexico. Maybe these are gods. How do we know? And some very wise Aztec, perhaps it was the king Moctezuma, he said, well, look, do this. Follow behind them. Be nice. Find out what they like to eat. Okay? Offer them different things, bananas, coconut, mangoes, rice, whatever we have, corn. Give them some nice spicy dishes. They'll like that. And follow them around. And then observe them to see if they make stool and urine. If they make stool and urine, they're not gods. But in any case, collect their stool and bring it back to me, and we'll examine it. And if it smells bad like human stool, we'll conclude they're not gods. They're just ordinary people. So they did that, and they concluded that Cortez and his fellow conquistadors were no gods. They were, in fact, human beings, and they could be killed. So they did their best to kill them, right? When Srila Prabhupada visited San Francisco after a long absence from the United States, the devotees were so ecstatic to see him. They wanted to get some prasadam. So when he sneezed into a tissue, they would collect that and, frame it as Guru Prasad. Well, some of these things may be a little bit extreme. It may be that if you notice, well, the Guru has to go to the bathroom. Well, how could he be God? Sakshadaritas Vena Samasta Shastya. He's supposed to be as good as God, but if he's going to the bathroom like an ordinary person, how could he be God? So these are contradictions that, as you say, may bring one like Icarus to fly so close to the sun that your wax feathers melt off and you fall into the sea of ignorance. Well spoken, Pranashish.
Okay, so that's the person of Guru, right? How about the idea of light as truth, right? Divine truth, absolute truth, knowledge. Does the same apply? Do the closer we get to this divine knowledge also pose the same dangers as getting close to the physical Guru?
Yes, of course. This is why what I was just reading from the Loving Search, uh, the idea that Srila Sridhar Maharaj is forwarding is Jnana Shunya Bhakti. And his example is Brahma. Uh, Brahma is the creator of the universe. We talked about this before. He has all knowledge. He's the all-knowing God, right?
Right.
So when he comes across the pastimes of Krishna, he's bewildered. Wait a minute. So he vanishes the cowherd boys to see what happens. But it doesn't do anything. The pastimes go on. And so you have the Brahma Vimohana Leela. Because Brahma is endowed with a certain knowledge, it's difficult for him to develop the same kind of Jnana Shunya Bhakti or uh, divine love without knowledge that is seen in Vrindavan, which is why he doesn't participate in those pastimes. So the goal is to get beyond knowledge. As we were discussing earlier, no amount of words or discussions or lectures or readings of this type can really help us in the end. Uh, how to develop bhakti? It's it's a mystery. It's not such an easy thing. You can read Rupa Goswami, you can serve the guru, you can do the 64 processes of devotion, but have you really developed bhakti? You know, my wife asks me, so what are you doing this morning? I say, well, I'm going to give another platika, another talk about Srila Srinivas and how to be a perfect. I'm going to explain to people how to be a perfect person, how to realize God. But have I, am I a perfect person? Have I realized God? Not by any means. I get upset by a million trivial, stupid things that happen on a daily basis. I don't like the dogs barking next door. It disturbs me. If I was in a perfect state of samadhi, why would I let the dogs bother me? So, yeah, it's not such an easy thing. But the thing is, in our culture, 20th century civilization, we revere knowledge to such an extent that we think that if we know something, we can kind of encircle it, you know. There's a Spanish author I like, Miguel de Unamuno. He wrote a book called Tragic Sense of Life, where he's trying to examine the idea of faith. And because he's a knower, he's a philosopher, he's struggling with his faith. And he says, you know, so how do you know the soul? We were talking about how the soul is self-effulgent or self-evident truth. Uh, and he said, well, our modern approach is to take anything that we're interested in understanding and laying it out on a dissection table and trying to dissect it and take it apart to see what's there. But if you do that, you kill it. See? So the nature of intelligence or intellect is neti neti. It's not this, it's not that. And then you try to arrive at the truth. My phone doesn't work. Well, try turn it off and turn it on. Okay, that doesn't work. Take the battery out, put it back in. That doesn't work. Uh, Try a new system like that. Plug it into your computer. So you go, well, it's not this, it's not this, it's not that. And in this way, you arrive at the truth. That's our intellectual approach. But you can't do that with yourself, because if you come to negate yourself absolutely, then you don't exist. And then how will you know yourself? But this is for the Buddhists. This is why, this is why scientists like Buddhism, because science works through the process of elimination. So you eliminate, 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 and then you eliminate the self, and then there's nothing. And now you're happy. You have reached Satori, which is the negation of everything. That's Buddhism, right? But it's not the same as Atmagyan, you know. And then the Shankarites, they're into Atmagyan. So if you practice a different kind of meditation, you can arrive at the soul and say, okay, I'm perceiving the self-effulgent nature of the soul. But to go deeper, that's more problematic. And for this, we like the guru. I don't know. Maybe I went off topic there. I like going off topic. That's kind of what I do.
A colleague of mine, they breed dogs, and they're very close to the dogs. They have a lot of dogs, and one of their favorite dogs died recently, and they both seen the soul leave the dog's head. They both seen this white spark. They both seen it. And
Yeah, so, if you can see, you can see. There's no point in arguing whether sight exists or not. I may have spoke ill about the so-called Christians, but they have a lot of very deep and good ideas too, because many Christians, they understand the self-evident nature of uh, the soul. But they have an interesting argument about uh, the I, where they say, how is it possible that an I develops from nothing, or that there's these organs floating around that have some kind of purpose, but then they coalesce suddenly and become an I with vision. It doesn't make sense. An eye is an integral organ. It has thousands of tiny components that make it into something that can see, but independently, none of those components have any will to see or any need to see. So how would that evolve? It's an interest. I may not be representing that perfectly, but you'll find that, it's an interesting argument against the idea that suddenly something just sees because the genes like it. So there's all these different refutations that can be given, but what the Bhagavatam says there is ultimately quite interesting. It says you can argue God exists, God doesn't exist. That will go on forever. But this sort of argument is based on an imperfect understanding of the soul. Anyone with self-perception or self-knowledge can see the soul exists. And it's a difficult argument to pitch because it's kind of a circular argument, but it's like saying, if you know, you know.
yeah, especially in the last 20 years with the new age, blah blah, and all the latest trendy, cool people like not Komsky. Who's the other guy? There's a lot of them. They're the guy who writes the books. He's a bit like Komsky. Anyway, them, the modern philosophers, let's just say, and they equate the soul with life, right? The life-giving element of any living thing is the soul. But then that thing dies, and then the living being dies, the animal or the person dies,
Right.
and so does the soul, because they don't have an idea of eternality or a spiritual world or the rest that goes with the soul. They just equate soul with that life-giving element. That which gives us life is the proof of the soul.
Okay, but in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna points out that whatever that light is, it's outlasting and outliving various iterations of physical reality in the sense that you're the same entity throughout your life. And if you live 70 years, you're shedding various different physical forms and bodies, just like the caterpillar uh, is totally transformed into a butterfly. Caterpillars have teeth, butterflies don't, you know. Caterpillars are cylindrical, butterflies have wings. So the physical form uh, transforms completely. There's a total metamorphosis, whereas the light within is steady. And dekinos minyata deke komaram yovanam jara, from komaram, childhood, yovanam, uh, juventude, juvenile, jovanam, youth, to jara, old age. Something withstands, transcends the different changes of physical form. So the idea that that's true throughout the entire cycle of life, that the soul transcends all these different iterations, but at the final point, when the body collapses, that is untrue. It doesn't really make very much sense. So there's a good logical idea, may not be entirely logical according to Wittgenstein, but as I said, Wittgenstein and Bertrand Russell, all these atheist philosophers, they also had to confront their own humanity, you know. So anyways, this is our thought experiment for today, October 19th, 2025. And we hope you learn something or find some comfort in our talk on Sri Guru and his grace. This is a non-commercial discussion between friendly devotees who share a particular appreciation for His Divine Grace Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Dev Goswami. And we're all very proud and happy to participate and have you listen to, this humble soul and the other humble souls who are here with us, including Advai Krishna, Tungarasa Dasi, Sevarupa Devi Dasi and her friends and family. Is that your family or your friend?
Oh, this is my daughter, Kayla.
Hi, Hare Krishna. It's very good to see you, and thank you for, contemplating these ideas from Srila Sri Ramar's teachings, Sri Guru and his grace. If there's any credit to any of this, it's his. We're trying to keep his memory alive. Recently, devotees were celebrating his appearance day, and we celebrate the appearance day of Srila Sri Ramar's every time we have these talks because we're trying to keep his ideas and teachings and memories alive. So thank you very much all, and I'm going to sign off. Hare Krishna and Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai.
Yogi Prabhu ki jai. Dhanyavad all the devotees, steadfast